the cloud. Oh, I still don't have a chair down here. This from Thomas Paine. And here we're actually kind of going into a new one of the founding values. Let me see what we got next time. I'm not sure we are. All right, those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigues of supporting it. This is from the American Crisis, a series of, well, I want to say 16 or 19 different essays that were written over a period of time during the dark days of the American Revolution. It looked like we weren't going to make it. All right. Yeah, save that. Okay, so today we are going to be working with charts. So you'll want to download, we're going to actually pick up the example that we, you might remember the census data that we worked with, that we made it kind of easy to be able to look at multiple counties side by side to be able to compare them. We're going to build now on that same example, and we're going to build a facility for us to be able to say, now that we've brought up the set of counties that we want to compare, we want to be able to build a chart to be able to compare them for whatever measure we're currently interested in looking at. So we'll be looking at getting familiar with working with chart objects, as well as kind of building on that example. So once we have that file downloaded, might make sense for us just to kind of review what we had done before. So in our module 1, it's really not that much code at all. But first, we started off by setting up the compare sheet and using data validation to give us just the list of different counties here. And the idea is when we select a county, and it automatically brings in the information for that county so that we can compare this set of counties. And that's what that code already does. All right, any questions before we kind of get in and start working with charts? Let's do this. I'm going to start just by kind of, maybe I'll get down to just maybe 4 counties here. I would like to start off just by building the chart without trying to think about the VBA or even recording the macro. Let me see if I can do what it takes to build the chart that I would be interested in having made. And then once we've identified that chart and it looks like, yeah, that's the one we're going to work with, then we'll record ourselves making it, and then we'll start putting some code around it to make it behave more the way that we'd like it to behave. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight just the city, the county and the state data. And then I'm going to highlight one of these that might be interesting for me to look at. I'm doing row 12. I don't know what it is, but the numbers are all positive. So that will look like a pretty decent chart. Now, I'm not going to try, just kind of from past experience, if I thought maybe I can actually highlight this label and that will go well, but that won't go well. So I'm just going to highlight the data that I want to grab. So I'll choose insert, and I'm just going to choose this kind of this first column chart. And the 2D column chart will be what I'm after. That's kind of a clean looking chart. I'm going to want to put, eventually I'm going to want to put the variable that the chart is actually showing in the title, but Excel's not going to do that automatically for me, kind of no matter how I select that data. So we'll get it built to here, and then through VBA, we'll put the variable as the title. But this looks like a pretty good chart. Any questions? Or how many, just kind of show me how comfortable you are working with charts in Excel. 0 to 5, I've totally done a lot with charts, and okay. So it's not so much about building charts today as it is automating it, but that's the chart that we want to record ourselves making. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And I think I want to record myself selecting the data as well, because building that chart, part of building that chart is going to be selecting the data, because having the data selected when the chart gets built is what tells the chart engine what to actually build in the chart. So I'll have no data selected, and I'll start recording. Come to my developer tab, click record macro. And for the name, what we call this, add chart. And maybe for the shortcut key, I'll put in a capital C, Control Shift C for the chart. charts the data from the active charts the data from the active row. All right, so again, I'm going to highlight this top part to get my city or my county and my state data, and then I'll pick some other row to highlight. I'll build the chart and then stop recording. So insert, chart, column chart. And maybe I'm just going to drag this once so we can kind of see what it records to move the chart. And then I'll stop. So take a look at that code. So I've got module 1, which is where we had the code from last time. But every time you open up the workbook again, when you start recording macros, it's going to say, let's go ahead and put the macros from this recording session into a new module. So module 2 is going to be where we have the code for today. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So we've got this data. We select that, and then, oh, interesting. So we're selecting, it's selecting the multi-cell range here, and it's activating B12. I'm not sure we really need to have that activated. In fact, I'm just kind of curious. I'm gonna disable that row. Just see what happens if we run that without activating the data. I believe it's going to work about the same way. Oh, okay, so this failed because it's referring to the chart by its number, but I think it built that chart okay. So this chart's not chart 2, it's chart 3, so this code's not working. Yeah, that's okay, we'll adjust it. Yeah, so it looks like even without selecting that particular cell, just activating the range was plenty to do. And then, this is kind of interesting. We're calling the add chart, actually we're calling a method called add chart 2. I don't know what happened to add chart 1 or just add chart, but apparently it broke. And so they had to make add chart 2. Oh, okay, yeah. So we probably had to add chart 1, but you'll notice this is a method. This is the method of the object that we're calling. And so the name of the method is not going to change from time to time that we call it. So there really is an add chart, and maybe it takes a different set of arguments, but they said, oh, we need another way to add charts, and so we're going to create a second method for adding charts, and that's the one the macro recorder uses. Could we try to figure this out with the add chart method? Yeah, probably, but the whole point was here we wanted to record ourselves doing it so we could see how it was done. So yeah, add chart 2, it's incidental that the chart name was chart 2 and this is chart 2, because this will always record with add chart 2. And then we tell it 201. I'm trying to remember what the 201 means. It's going to be a clustered column chart, but I'm not sure what the 201 is. Should we find out? Let's find out real quick. Add chart 2 VBA. Shapes add chart 2 method. So it looks like the first one is a style. -1 to get the default style, or it's a style specified in the Excel chart type. So what was it, 201? So that 201 is not listed here. So it says it's supposed to be one of these chart types. Maybe that's the second argument. Excel clustered column. Excel clustered column. So that's, maybe I'm looking at the second argument. Let me go back and take a look. So style is the first one. Oh, it's a variant. That's really interesting. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't even know what the 201 means, but that's going to build the chart. That line's going to build the chart that we're after. Now, a couple interesting things here that I want to take a look at. First one is that add chart or add chart 2 is a method of what kind of object, what type of object, what class of object? The shapes collection. Now, is there such a thing as a chart object? Yes. And one might think that the add chart method would be a method of the charts collection or the chart objects collection, chart objects collection. But it's not. It's a method of the shape collection. And the reason is because The only thing that we actually put onto a worksheet that we can say, hey, I want to put this onto a worksheet is a shape. If we want to have a chart, we have to have a chart, but the chart is going to be in a shape. And so the shapes collection is what actually creates the chart. And what it's really saying is it's going to create a shape, and in that shape, it's going to have a chart. So there's these two different objects that we're going to have to work with. The shape object is one that's contained in the chart, and then the chart object is actually in the shape. So in fact, why don't we go ahead and set up those two variables to kind of help keep us straight. So let me dim CHRT as a chart object, and then let me dim SHP as a shape. Now, okay, who can remind me when I'm saying dim SHP as shape, what kind of variable am I making? I am making a variable. It's kind of a special kind of variable. A variable. What kind of variable is it? It's a chart variable, but kind of more generally, it's an object variable. And when I declare an object variable, what am I really allocating? Am I allocating enough memory to hold that whole object in memory? I'm allocating enough memory just to hold the reference. So what we're saying here is that at some point, a chart object is going to be created, or a shape is going to get created. And we're going to want to be able to remember in memory where that is stored. And so all I'm allocating here is enough memory to hold a memory address. Somewhere else, at some other memory address, the shape's going to be created, and I'm going to want to be able to reference that. In fact, you'll notice here that we're saying, okay, on the active sheet, we're referring to the shapes collection. We're calling this, and so here's the call to the add chart method. And what are we doing after it? I mean, so we've got something else happening here on this line. Someone help me understand what's going on. We're calling a method, and then right on that same line with the call to the method, we're saying dot select. Go ahead. Yeah, so this is going to create a shape with a chart in it, and the method is going to return a reference to the shape that was created. And so everything that I have highlighted up there is going to evaluate to the newly created shape. And then we're calling the select method on that shape to make it the active shape on the sheet, because we're going to have because there's a reference to active chart. Let me point with the mouse so folks online can see it. So down here, we're going to talk about active chart. Well, active chart is a reference to the chart in the active shape. So by selecting this shape, we're going to be able to refer to this as active chart. I want to kind of clean this up a little bit. And so instead of selecting that shape, I am going to just, right, because this whole thing evaluates to a reference to the newly created shape. And all I really want to do here is I want to capture that reference. That's why I have that shape variable. So this thing is going to go create the shape, and it's going to return the memory address where it created the shape. And so I just want to come here and say set SHP equal to that. So now I've got my shape variable, SHP variable, which is going to be able to refer to the newly created shape. Now, that newly created shape has a chart in it. In fact, let's look at this. Let me just say SHP dot. You'll see that there's a chart property. Now, that chart property will be a reference to a chart sitting somewhere else in memory, a reference to a chart, if the shape holds a chart. If the shape doesn't hold a chart, it's actually a reference to the object nothing, which is like saying it's not referring to any chart. But we know that this one's going to have a chart in it because we just called the add chart to method. So I want to capture the reference to the chart here. So set my CHRT object equal to that chart. So now I have two variables, one pointing at the shape and one pointing at the chart. So when I want to manipulate the shape, I'll just refer to my SHP variable. When I want to manipulate the chart, I'll refer to my CHRT variable. Okay, show me on your hands from 0 to 5 how comfortable you are with using these two object variables to connect onto those newly created objects. So I'm seeing 2s, 4s, 5s, some 5s here. Okay, so yeah, object variables is probably one of the difficult concepts in the class. The thing to realize is that anytime I have an object in memory anywhere, if I can get a reference to that object, another way of saying that is if I can figure out what the memory address of that object is, I can store that address or that reference in an object variable, and then that object variable just becomes a shortcut way to refer to the object. And so when we call the addChart2 method, it's going to return a reference to where the chart's created. And we're just capturing that, it's going to return a reference to the shape that's created that holds the chart. And so that's going to allow me to then just to refer to that. Okay, so now, yes, go ahead.
What you're setting the shape to, it seems to me like you're setting it equal to like a method that would create a new chart every time. So what is that shape actually equal to?
Okay, this is a good question. So the question is, wow, this almost seems like we're setting shape equal to this statement here. So that now when I say shape, that will be the same thing as saying this. So if I refer to shape again, will it create the chart again? And the answer is no, not at all. What this is that this method, addChart, when it runs, it's going to create a shape in memory with a chart built into it. It's going to create a shape, and then it's going to say, oh, I created that shape at this particular place in memory. And it's going to pass back the address to that place in memory. It's going to pass back a reference to the newly created shape. And so we are catching that reference here. So this is going to be the location of that shape. This is now going to be a shortcut to whatever shape got created here. Okay? In the back, go ahead. Oh, so if we wanted to have a shortcut that would say, oh, we want a shorter way to actually be able to call this method, I don't know of any way to do that. I'm not saying that it's not possible in VBA, but I have never come across anything about that. So you got to refer to the object. Now, we could shorten this down a little bit because we could make a short reference to this object, but then we're going to have to call the method. However we get to that object, we've got to call the method to be able to get that to be produced. There's a question down here. Yeah, Drew.
Yeah. Remind me why we have set in front of the SHP and the chart objects.
Yeah, okay. So why do we have to use the keyword set? Why can't we just say SHP equals this? And so there are kind of two ways to think of this. One is to say the rule. Here's the rule. When you have a shape, when you have an object variable of any kind, and these are object variables, they're just, this object variable is only allowed to bind onto charts. By saying as chart, it only can connect onto chart objects. The shape can only connect onto shape objects. When we're going to bind the syntax to bind an object variable to an object, you have to put the keyword set. Now, I can tell you why, when they were making the language, they thought this was a good idea. And what the ambiguity that leads us to actually be able to say that. It will take about 5 minutes, and I don't think it will make you a better programmer at all to understand the why. But when you're binding an object variable onto an object, you have to use the keyword set. It's just the syntax of the language. It reminds me of a professor I had in statistics when I was doing my PhD, that whenever I said to him I didn't understand what he was talking about, he would do a mathematical proof to prove to me that it was true, which completely went over my head. And it was about half the semester before I realized that's what he would do every time I asked. When I said I didn't quite understand it, he would prove it. And I finally had to say to him, I believe you. Look, I believe that what you're saying is true. You don't have to prove this to me. Just kind of help me understand it a little bit better. That was a bad class. Okay, there's a question here.
Can a shape have more than one chart?
Can a shape have more than one chart in it? The answer to that is no. One shape per chart. Other questions? Okay. So now what we have is anytime we have to refer to our shape, we've got this variable. Anytime we have to refer to our chart, we've got this variable. So down here, we're saying active chart dot set source data. So I'm not activating that shape anymore, so I don't think it's going to be active, but that's the reference to the chart. So now I'm just going to change that CHRT. Now we're going to end up changing this. We've got to make this dynamic. So right now it's just building the chart for that range that I recorded. But I just want to make a few changes here and then see if we can get it to work, and then we'll kind of go step by step. Now, here I'm changing the left and I'm changing the top. Here it's incrementing it. And so it's saying, move it to some different location. But you'll notice that this is a reference to a particular shape. On the active sheet, there's a collection of shapes and there's one that has a name. Now, the name is no good because the next time I make a chart, it's going to have a different shape name. But whatever the name of it is, we've captured a reference to it right here. So I'm just going to change that to SHP. That's the reference to the shape. And we probably don't really need the decimals on this. Let me just kind of simplify that. So I'm moving it up and to the increment top, increment left. I think I'm moving that up and to the right is what I'm doing. Okay. In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we split the screen so we can see this happen? I'm going to delete the chart that's here already. And I'm going to run this with F8, which will let me step through it. So we're selecting that range of data. We're making the chart. Now we're binding the chart object to the chart that's in the shape. That's really interesting. It looks like we don't really have to set the source because the source is already set here. I like it. We're going to skip that line. And now we'll see the increment, F8, moves it to the right, and then moves it up just a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. Well, I'm glad we ran that once so I could remember that we don't need this line at all.
What would happen though if you left that code but got rid of the range one?
Ah, okay. So that, in fact, that was kind of my initial thought. I think when I was first building this example years, and dare I say it, decades ago now. Yeah, you can just set the source to it. The answer is no good because when this add chart happens, how that add chart behaves depends on what's selected. So it is not just setting the source data, it's doing more. And exactly what else more it's doing, I don't know. But it does, that data does need to be selected now. I said that, and that was true maybe 8 or 10 years ago when I actually did this the first time. Let's go ahead and just see what happens. So instead of, I'm going to comment out the selecting, and then we'll build it this way. Oh, it was still selected, so that's no good. Let me select something else, delete this one. And we'll run this with F8. Oh, so now it looks like maybe that was the difference between add chart and add chart 2. I don't know. But it looks like it takes it okay that way as well. Oh, which one do we like better? Looks like we got to do one of these, but not necessarily both. I kind of like doing it better without actually doing the selection. I'm going to leave the select there commented out, but let's go ahead and get this customized. Other questions? Thank you for asking that question. Other questions? All right. Yeah.
So seeing that, oh wait, no. Like, is it like when we set the chart, the object variable
Here.
we don't have like a visible chart yet, but the shape is expecting to have a place for a chart.
Oh, okay. So when we call the add chart method, it's going to create a shape, and inside that shape, it's going to create a chart. And so the chart exists, even though we don't see it yet. The chart object is there. And then when we set the data of it, that's when we can actually see it, when it populates. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these just to kind of simplify our code. We are going to be referring to both the chart and the shape individually here in a moment. So here we're going to set the source data. Now, that's kind of an ugly expression to have to make. But let's think about this data. So how much data are we going to select here? Well, it depends on how many counties are showing, right? If someone says, you know what, I want to show another county. Oh, Jefferson I already had selected. I'm in break mode, so it's not executing. Jim Hogg is the name of a county. That's an awesome county name. I gotta chart Jim Hogg just because I love the name. Jim Hogg, Texas. Oh, and we want one more. So probably should have left it anyway. Let's bring one more in. Oh, we've got Jim Wells twice. That's no good. Kendall, Texas. Okay, so now, I mean, when we built this chart before, there were 4 columns. Now there's going to be 5 columns. The number of columns depends on how many the user has brought up to be able to compare with each other. So how are we going to find the column? There's a couple ways that we could do it. I think the way I'd like to do it is I would like to go all the way out here to the very rightmost cell and do a control left arrow. And that will tell me which column. That gets me to the cell that we actually, the last data is in. So let's just create a variable to keep track of that. Let me dim call as an integer. There are only like 16,000 columns. And so integer, which is plus or minus 32,000, is plenty big to handle all the columns we can have. And maybe I'll do this first thing. Maybe I'll say, I want to set call equal to. Now, what shape are we on, or what sheet are we on? It's called compare. Does it have a name? It's just called sheet 1. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to set, why don't we just make sure we select that sheet? So even before we get here, I'm going to make sure that the compare sheet is selected. So worksheets. And the one I'm interested in is named compare. Dot activate. All right, so now we know that our active sheet is the sheet that we're dealing with. So I don't have to prefix my other references with the sheet I'm interested in because I now know that it's the active sheet. So column is going to equal cells. The row I want is row 1. The column I want is however many columns there are. So I'll just say columns dot count. Now I haven't told it which sheet I mean, so we'll refer to the active sheet. So it's going to say on this active sheet, how many columns are there? That's the number that's going to be in there, 16,000 something. From there, I want to say end XL to left. So it's going to I'm not ever selecting any cell here. It's saying refer to the very last cell in column 1. I'm sorry, the last cell in row 1. And then from there, do like a control left arrow. I haven't selected that cell. I've only referred to it. And now I just want to know what column it's in. So now I should have a variable that tells me the column of the last data. I'm going to go ahead and step through to here, F8. Okay, so I've run, I have something spelled wrong. Oh, this is spelled all the way out, COLUMN. Okay, so now I should be able to look at my call and it says 6, is that right? Yeah, F is the 6th letter of the alphabet. So I'm reading which column my data ends in. Now I'm going to use that information to build the reference to the range that's down here. So I could just kind of format this string. So in other words, it's always going to start in column B, so that's okay. It's always going to start on row 1. But here I would have to convert now that 6 into an E. That's not impossible. And it would probably be okay to go down that road if I was positive that I was never going to have more than a single letter column name. Converting Z into a particular, or converting the column for Z 26 into a particular letter, not too problem, but not a problem. But as soon as I get to that next column, AA, that's going to get a little bit ugly. So I think I'd rather keep my column as a number rather than try to put it as a letter. So let's take a look at a couple of different ways. Well, let's look at the way that I'd like to go about referring to the range. It's a complex range. I don't think we've done it before. Say I've got one block selected and another block selected. So to get to this first one, let's take a look at how we might refer, let me stop my code here. Let's take a look at how we might refer to this first block from B1 to F2. So I'm going to first give myself cells to refer to, in fact, maybe I'll use range. Range B1. So that's going to refer to that first range, but if I want a multi-cell range, I can say range, start at that cell and end in cells, row number 2, column number, was it 5? A, B, C, D, E. Are we ending in E? It's 6. Thank you. Okay, and so using the range method and giving it 2 different cells, it gives me the contiguous block bounded by those 2 cells. So far, so good? Whew. So that's one expression. And then I'm going to need my other one, which is wherever my active cell is. So let's suppose, let's get it selected this far. So I kind of like this, reference to the cell. I'm going to declare another object variable here, dim RNG as a range object. And then after we set the column, I'll set RNG equal to that expression, except not stopping on column 6, instead stopping on column call, whatever call we calculated here is going to be the ending column for that range. So this is going to get me the range for the labels. Now, to be able to add in here, to dynamically add in the part that says, in addition to having this selected, we're also going to select this. This is going to depend, how should we have the user communicate to us which row they want to build the chart for? We're going to have some way for the user to tell us, this is the row I want to build the chart for. How should we do that? Yeah, whichever cell they're on when they run the macro, that's the chart. That's the cell they want to build the chart for. So we've already got a call figured out for our last column. Let's make another variable, and we'll put it right next to the column, dim row as a long integer. And let's just say we want the row, I may even do that right after I do the column, row is going to equal, how do I ask for the row of the active cell? Yeah, active cell.row. Now, if my active cell is here's really my first data. Row 4 is the first chartable data. Why would I want to chart row 3? There's no reason, right? Because these are actually, even though those are numbers, these are names. These are names that happen to be made up of all numbers. It's not like saying somehow Kendall County is something more than Jim Hogg County. It's a numeric identifier. So the first one that's really legal to chart here is going to be 4. So let's just do this. After we set row, let's take a peek at it. Let's say if row is less than 4, then row equals 4. So if you're somewhere up higher than the first chartable row, we're going to say, sorry, we're going to build the chart for the chartable row. Another option would be to put up a message box that says, hey, you got to be on a row to chart, and then exiting out. But this is a little cleaner, I think. Okay. So I could actually do something similar here. Let me just set range again. We'll modify this in a moment because we're kind of overriding range. And I'm going to want to use cells both times now. But now the row that I'm using is going to be row number row. I've calculated the row the user was on. This is going to start in column 2, and it's going to end in row, column, col. So this expression is going to get my header. This expression is going to get the data that we're after. Let me go ahead and just run to here. And let's just ask for what the address of range is. B4 to F4, that's the one that we're on. B to F, A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah, that's exactly what it should be. Now, the problem is I need to get this range and this range put together in one big range. Fortunately, there's a method just for that. It's called union. So here, I've set range equal to my first one. And now what I'd like to do is that I would like to union that range with this range here. So instead of setting range equal to this, which is going to overwrite my existing range, I'm going to set this equal to union. First argument is going to be one range, and I can put a potload of ranges, maybe up to 30 ranges. But I only need 2. I need this range that I've just defined, and the range I defined only moments ago, RNG. I could do it all in one statement just by moving this and putting it here in place of RNG. But since using union kind of has a limit as to how many you can do, I want to show you how you can say, build a range and then union something else onto it, union something else onto it. You could do multiple unions and have way more than 30 original ranges put together in a large non-contiguous range. Question?
So when we replace the first range with the second range, you said that it would replace it in that variable. That's
right. This has a place to store one memory address, location for one thing.
So why didn't you print in the range address that came up with?
Oh, it didn't. I printed.
Oh, okay.
That was left over. That was left over from the last time I printed it there. All right, let me go ahead and stop this, and I'll run it again to here. And now I'll clear this out so we don't have kind of question about what it's actually printing. So now I'll print that address of that range, and it's B4 to F4 and B1 to F2. So now we've got that whole range. So now RNG refers to that whole range that we wanted to refer to. Questions? So now we should be able to use, right? So this is a reference to a particular range. Well, we now have that in RNG. So I should be able to set the source equal to RNG. I'll just run this the rest of the way. Well, let's go line by line, F8. And that should now pop in the data. So here's a chart. Oh, you see, it's not quite doing it right anymore. So yeah, I think we are going to want to select that first. So yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, it's because of what I had selected. So let me try that again with only having a single cell selected and see what it does. No, still not the look that I'm looking for. So that's okay. We're setting the range here. Let's just go ahead and select the range. selecting that range. Now we're adding it and we're getting the chart style that we're after. We can set the source here, but I think it's already set based on what I had selected before. So I think we are going to go ahead and define the range, select it, and then build the chart with that range selected. Questions? I got a whole bunch of charts made that I haven't deleted. And the truth is, it will probably be really helpful for me to have some method to kind of clear off all these shapes off the chart. So let's just go ahead and take a little detour for a moment to make something called remove charts. Actually, we'll remove all the shapes. Remove shapes. Here's how we remove the first shape off of the active sheet. So we're going to say active sheet dot shapes sub 1, the first shape on the sheet. I think it's dot delete. I'm just going to print off the count of our shapes right now. Right now there's 4. I'm going to run this, and if it works, then our count should be 3. So now I'm just going to put a do loop around this until active sheet dot shapes dot count equals 0. So we're going to keep deleting the first shape on the sheet until there are no more shapes on the sheet. Because of course, when we delete the first one, what used to be the second one now becomes the first one. So I should be able to just kind of scroll over a bit. So now if I run my remove shapes, it should just continue in that loop until it's taken all the shapes off the sheet. And this may be something that we just use for development. It may be a tool that we give to the user. You know, if you put a bunch of charts on here and you want to move them off, you can. Question?
Or you could have it just delete the last shape that you create. If it's one that you don't like, then you can just like click.
Oh yeah, it could be a tool. Just quick, maybe we give them another tool. Clear the most recently added shape, or clear them all. Certainly. Okay, but at least now it'll be convenient for us after we made a bunch of charts to kind of blow them all away. All right. Okay, so now actually I think we're in pretty good shape. No pun intended. Select this particular line, Control-Shift-C, get rid of my stop. And it builds the shape for there. Oh, now we got to get the name of the variable into the title. That'd be our next thing to do. Okay, so let's just go ahead and modify. That's going to be a property of the chart. So CHRT, I thought for sure that would be something like title. But there's no title property. Let's go. I mean, the first time I went looking for the title property of a chart, it took me probably a half hour to find it. It's a property in there. It's not called title. Can you find what it is? I'll give you 30 seconds to kind of look through that chart object and see if you can find the title. 30 seconds. Okay. I can barely see that second hand. All right, go. Oh, yeah, you found it already. Chart title. Yeah, it's called chart title. Do you really have to say that you're on the chart object already, chart? If we said title, would there be any question about it? Apparently, we got to call it the chart title. So the property here is actually called chart.chart title. And I thought that would be pretty easy, right? Just going to have to now give it some title. But, chart title, debug, chart.chart title. It certainly doesn't like this. Let's take a look. It turns out that chart title is not just text, it's an object. And it has a property called text. Maybe that can equal new title. I think that's okay. Yeah, so now that actually gets me there. Oh, the first time I tried to figure that out, it really did take me more than a half hour to get that far. Now, what do I want to put in for the chart title? I don't want to put new chart title. What do I want to put? Yep.
Just had a quick question.
Oh.
There's also caption as
Another property.
yeah, property. What would you do?
Chart title has a caption property. I don't know. Let's see. Call it chart title 2. Chart title 2. Looks like it's a synonym for text. Somehow we can give 2 names to the text of it, but we can't give 2 names to the title of it. So we call it chart title. I'm still bitter. Okay. So caption or text will do the trick. And does it even have one called characters? I think it has one called characters. And characters has a caption. I think that will work too. The characters object just kind of gives you some extra tools. We're working with the characters kind of on a more individual basis than just kind of dumping a whole new string into it. Yeah, even that works. I'm going to go back to just caption. Okay, but what do I want to put there? I don't want to put a fixed string. What do I want to put? Go ahead.
Maybe cells, parenthesis, row, one, dot value.
Row 1. Yeah, because we already know the row that we just built the chart for. We just have to pull the expression off of column 1. I'll run this again. And now I've got the chart that's showing that information, and it's given me the name of the variable that I'm charting right there at the top. That's a useful chart. What am I looking at here? Total residential population. So Kendall, I can go, wait a minute. Oh, net change. So what does this tell us? Kendall's growing, Jim Hogg is shrinking. You know, if I lived in a county called Jim Hogg, I'd probably want to get out too. You know, but that seems to be the popular thing. Jim Wells growing, Jeff Davis and Jack counties. If they're growing, it's not by much. Let me go ahead and clear my charts off again by running that chart. Clear. Questions? Okay. So next, right now, I mean, you know what I'd like to do? I would like to also say, hey, listen, when I'm done running this, you know, maybe the user is going to want to chart 3 or 4 rows right in a row. Maybe they're going to want to build a chart for every single one of these. So I would like to kind of facilitate things by saying, after we're all done building that chart, let's just go ahead and select the next row down. So cells, row +1, next row, column 1, dot select. So now Control-Shift-C should let me make a potload of charts. All of a sudden, I'm really glad that I have the ability to delete them all because I got a bunch of them now. But what's the real problem with, what's the biggest problem with my interface now? What's that? They're all on top of each other. So I'd really like to make it, where do I want to put the chart? Where do you think I should put the chart? When they make the chart, where should I put it? Let me clear off my charts. Top left. So like right here, A1. Now we're looking at the data, we're charting the data. I think the last thing I want to do is cover the data with a chart. So maybe the top left of the blank space, maybe right over here would be a good place to put it. That's what you meant. Yeah, of course, that's right, okay. So, all right, so now we notice that, you know, so we've manipulated the chart object by changing a property of the chart, the title, but the chart doesn't have a top and a left property. What does have a top and a left property? The shape has a top and a left property. Okay, so let's create a couple of more variables here. So let's Actually, let's make a constant. We haven't made very many constants. I'm going to make a constant called margin. And I'm going to set it equal to 10. Now, the units here are, the units that we're using probably have a name. I don't know the name of the units. It's not pixels. Because if it's pixels, it would depend on how far we were zoomed in. Because a pixel is a fixed size. If I zoom in more, 10 pixels is still 10 pixels. So this is some measurement that is relative to the worksheet itself, not to the display that it's being shown on. And that's great, because that means we can build it with that unit, and it's always going to build at the same size with respect to the sheet, regardless of how far we're zoomed in. And so 10 is just a little bit. You know, how tall are my cells? Oh, you know, I think I can probably ask. Active cell dot height. Yeah, so the cell is 15 units tall. Somehow I'm thinking that 10 really isn't that much. So I'm not sure that it's the same. I'm not sure it's the same scale. Anyway, so we're going to give ourselves a margin of 10, whatever 10 is. But the nice thing is, since we've made a constant for it here, that we can, you know, we'll be using margin in several places throughout our code. We can just change it here and then kind of expand the margin. It'll happen everywhere. Okay. So let's go ahead and set the top of this to margin. So we've made the chart. And let's go ahead now, I'll put a comment here, let's position the chart. So let's just say that SHP dot top equals margin. Let me clear off, I'm going to clear off my, so I'm setting the top property of the shape equal to 10. You come over here and Control-Shift-C. Oh, yeah, it is. So that's about 2/3 of the height of that cell. So it's the same units. So I'm kind of thinking, yeah, 10, I guess 10 is fine. So we've set the top there, that'll be good. Now we want to set the left property of it. This is the hard part, because this is going to depend on how much data I have showing. So how are we going to figure out what the left of this should be? Let me go ahead and give myself a variable called left. That'll be a single precision floating point number. Let me calculate the left here. So I've got a variable called left as a single. How am I going to figure out what the left should be? I've given you a little hint. When I look at the height of a cell, that's going to tell you a little bit. Go ahead.
Could you select all the columns up to your call and then add like 10?
Oh, so you're saying select all the columns, ask for the width of the selection, and then add 10 to it. Oh, I like it. Except that a cell has a width. Oh, you know, I've never asked for the width of a range. Let me run this to here. I don't think it has the property. Let me run this right to here till I have this range defined. Is someone laughing? Are you laughing at me? Oh, reading Dilbert, I guess. I don't know. Okay. Let me run this. Question mark RNG dot width. Oh, look at that. We could totally do that. In fact, we don't have the whole thing selected, but we also have a left. So we have the range. We know how wide the range is. So let's just do that. Let's say that left is going to be range dot left plus range dot width plus margin. So that should say wherever the range starts, plus however wide it is, plus a little bit of margin. And I'll come over here and run it again. Oops, got a breakpoint. Oh, I set the variable, but I never changed the position of the you got to change left equal to that. Shape left equal to that. Let me clear that one off. Run. There we go. So that's putting that right in a wonderful place at the top left of the empty space. Now, go ahead and delete this. Let me add in a couple of more counties. Control-Shift-C, yeah. And it's putting it now right up at the top left of that. Beautiful. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Now, when we run it multiple times, the charts are still going to be on top.
Yeah, they're going to be on top of each other so far. I mean, we're still going to change this, but at least they're off the data. At least the first, this is working for the first, it's not working for the second one, but it's working for the first one. Okay, so now we just got to be able to figure out if it's the first one, we want to do this. If it's anything other than the first one, we got to do something else. Sounds like a job for the if statement. If something, then. Put my end if in here. Any thoughts? How can we tell if this is our first chart? Ah, we can count the shapes. Now, actually, as it turns out, we could count the shapes, but I want to introduce you to a new object. There's actually a collection called, shapes, and there's a collection called chart objects. Chart objects is like the collection of shapes that have charts in them. So if someone comes along and puts some other kind of shape on it, like a button, we may very well put a button on the sheet to like clear the charts or whatever. You're only going to want to keep track of the chart objects. So in fact, we probably should do that for our, let me see if I can easily change this to chart objects instead of shapes. All right, let me just make sure that that still works, because then we're only deleting our shapes that have charts in them. So if we put a button on it, it's going to leave the button alone. So chart objects are actually the shapes that are holding charts. So let's do that. Let's just go ahead and count the chart objects. If the count, active sheet dot chart objects dot count equals what? If it equals 1, we've already, by this time we've already created it. Yeah, so I saw someone saying 0. But by this time we've already created 1. So this will never be 0 because we're creating 1 above it. So if we only have one on the chart, we only have one chart on our sheet, then we're ready to position it. Okay. Else, so that means there's more than one. What should we do? Well, let's do this. Let's make the left equal, let's see, let's make our shape dot, let's do the top first. Shape dot top, what should the top be? Yep.
Multiply the margin by the number of accounts.
Ah, so we want to check and see how many charts we already got showing up there, And the margin's not going to be enough because the margin's a little bit and that chart is tall. So if we multiply the margin a bunch of times, it won't do it. But we could read the top of the most recently added chart and add on to it the height of the most recently added chart and add the margin onto that. So the question is, how are we going to refer to that chart? We could just write an expression that refers to the most recently added chart, or we could make a new object and also have a short word that refers to the most recently added chart. How do you want to do it? Just write an expression here, or should we make a new object and bind on to the most recently added chart? Just write the expression right here in space. Okay, that's not too bad. Because this is going to be, actually, I'm not sure I have to say active sheet in front of chart objects. Let me just see if I have to do that. Yeah, so it's this expression right here. It's going to be a reference to all the chart objects, and I can ask for the count. So if there's 5, this will be the 5th one. But I don't want the one that's most recently added because that's the one I'm trying to position. I want the one just before this. So -1. That's a long, ugly expression. So I think I'm gonna bind that. That's getting to a particular object. So I think I'm gonna make, let's see, where is shape? I'm gonna dim prior shape as a shape. And then I'm gonna go ahead and bind on to this. Just because that's it's getting too long for me to kind of refer to over and over again. So now I can say, so SHP is the one I'm trying to position. Prior SHP should be the most recently one that I have successfully positioned. And so I'm going to set the top of my current one equal to the top of my prior one plus the height of my prior one plus margin. And so now, first one should go at the margin. Every subsequent one should go the margin further down than the most recently placed chart. I'm going to give you just a little bit with that because I see a lot of you are still following it. Actually, maybe before you keep typing, I should make sure it works.
Move the left out of the if statement first.
I haven't changed the left. So you're saying set left here.
Just because if it's not equal to 1, then it won't get set to the correct left, right?
We still haven't, we haven't done what I want to do with left yet. And I'm not sure that it's right to have it totally outside the if statement. But for now, I think it'll be okay. So top is going to be different depending on which one it is, but they're all going to the same left. Ultimately, I think I'm not going to want to keep going all the way down. I think I'm going to want to go a little bit wider with these as well. But for now, I think this will be okay. Okay, I didn't like something. That's called chart 45. Chart objects count should be 2. So that should be 1. What was the error? Type mismatch. Oh, because I'm setting the shape. Oh, it's because I said that this is a shape and this is going to need to be a chart object because it's got to bind down to the kind of object that it is. So my prior shape object needs to be a chart object because that's the class I'm actually connecting onto. But I think it's still going to have the same properties. Yeah. So now that's coming in below. If I do another one, it's coming in below that. So here's the code. I had to change the declaration of prior shape to be a chart object rather than a shape. Questions? We need any more time with it? Ready to move on? Okay. Okay, so this is pretty good. Let me zoom out so we can kind of see this happen. Control Shift C. And put a few more in here. I'm going to get about there. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 charts. And I don't think I want to keep going down. I think I want to come over and build them again out here. So let's do this. Let's set the left. I'm going to set that in here. So when I set the top, I'm going to set the left just to right over here at the margin. But now in here, where I'm going to set the left is going to depend on kind of where I am, how far down I've come. So what's the question? Okay, so I just inside this if, I think what we're going to want to do is we're going to say, listen, if we've got 4 in here, or if we've got some multiple of 4 in here, instead of going down, we're going to want to go up and over, kind of reset a new, go back to the top. So let's do this. Let's say if our count and let's say mod 5 equals 0. I'm not sure that's the right expression, but I'm taking however many sheets. If it's evenly divisible by 5, then I'm ready to move over. We might end up having to play with that. Right? So if my count, right, mod 5 says divide this number by 5 and take the remainder. And so if the remainder of that is 0, I've got a multiple of 5 sheets showing. Then I'm going to want to do something else. I'll do it the way we've been doing it before. So this should still work for the first several ones. You go ahead and clear off my charts and run again. Apparently, I'm not setting the left. So right, yeah, I was only trying to stop when I was mod 5. Oh, I never set my left down here. So for now, I'm going to leave this setting the left the same way. Okay, so that gets me to the stop. So I got the 4 in there. My 5th one is coming. So now the mod 5 is 0. So I'm ready to decide what to do with this one. Okay, so now I think I want my top to go back to the margin. And now I want my left to be, what should the left be? Yep.
Well, just thinking of the next column over, you can just add another width of
Another width of the shape added on to my most recently added shape plus its width plus the margin. So I'm going to need the prior shape for this one. So I'm going to move where I'm setting the prior shape out of the else part of this. I'm going to bring it up above. So I'll have the prior shape regardless of which part of this if statement I come through. And so I'll set the left equal to the prior shape dot left plus the prior shape dot width plus the margin. So that should give me my top and my left set. Let's clear those off and try it again and see what it does. I'll check them out here in a second. Where are they? Oh. Thank you. Getting closer. Okay, I think the problem is that every time we come in here, we're just going over to the ranges width plus the margin. So I think if we're on a subsequent one, I think we can set the left here equal to the prior shape's left. Let's see what that does. So we're pretty good, except for leaving this little corner blank here. I think that means we actually have to check we're actually going to have to count this, let's see, before we've added the one. So let me just come in here and I'm fiddling just a bit here. E minus 1 to get off, to kind of get rid of the effect of the one that we just added. Let me change that to 4. Be clear and try that. Yeah, so because we're adding that additional one on, it's a little bit problematic, but that seems to take care of it. Oh, but that gets me right to what I wanted to do with this exercise. Questions? And that's really kind of the way of things. You kind of go step by step, get it to move a little bit, and it's not quite right. Figure out how you have to change it and work through it. So the pretty good example now. That's a pretty useful tool, right? You can bring up the ones you want to look at, click on the ones you want to chart, hit Control-Shift-C, build the chart for it, lays them in nicely. All right, folks, thanks for coming. I will see you next week. Class dismissed. I'm going to build a few more charts. And clear them off. Yes.
I just want to let you know that conversation about that. I used OneDrive. You said you weren't sure if that worked.
Yeah.
I haven't had any issues with it.
Oh, really?
So I just thought I'd let you know.
Excellent. Yeah, because I know that we struggled with it once, and I tried to write code around it.
Every once in a while, like the little block thread operates cell will say like can't save, just because it's always trying to auto save, and it doesn't auto save the VBA code well. But if you press save, it's
Thank you. I'm glad to know that. Yes. Corner. You set it there, and it'll be a little lower than that table. I'll be able to see it. Secondary function. Yes, that could explain why it was going down low. Because it was saying, well, there's already a shaker, we got to go below. Now we've got those clear.
No, so this is, that's too simple for this. Well,
I don't know.
yeah, there's no.
We're going down below.
Wait, what is this? Oh, I thought this is your head. Oh, this is.
You want the mod to have it on, it counts like it's one. Rather than
Yeah. So.
variation.
Yeah, nothing.
They did it by two.
Yeah, I mean, this, I think we're using it's called lock and say
You probably have to call it. I guess it is. Yep.
Yeah, and then IS 201, which is for
You're in good shape. Go ahead and clear it and run it and check it.